education, a strong work ethic, a supportive family, and a sense of adventure were all important factors in my life. I'm proud to have served my country, both in the U.S. Air Force and in the Gemini and Apollo program. I like being a team player, even though I was a pole vaulter. When people work together, you can sometimes accomplish the impossible. Apollo could never have happened without the cooperation and efforts of many people working together toward a shared goal. What we accomplished in one decade was unprecedented. But I know with determination and the will to do great things, we can do these things again. Consider this. Mankind dreamed for centuries of reaching space, the moon, and even the stars. But it wasn't until the 20th century that man took his first powered flight. In 1903, on a windy morning at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the Wright brothers, Flyer, took their first flight defying gravity. My mother, Marion Moon, was born that same year. Only 66 years later, Neil and I stepped on the moon, fulfilling the dreams of millions. I'll share a little bit about the story of how we got there and how when we work together, the world can achieve the next impossible dream. And then I'll give you a glimpse of my plans for the future, and we'll go into more details this afternoon. In 1961, NASA launched America's first Mercury astronaut, Alan Shepard, on a 15-minute suborbital flight that touched the edge of space. This was the start of an impressive catch-up process. The Russians had already made an incredible achievement by sending the first human into space, Yuri Gagarin, cosmonaut, for one full orbit around the Earth. But everyone wondered, what's next? President John F. Kennedy asked NASA and his ranks of engineers and rocket scientists, led by Wernher von Braun, what was possible. They told him it would take at least 15 years before we could put a man on the moon. Instead of accepting what was possible, on May 25th, 1961, just 3 weeks after Alan Shepard's flight, President Kennedy boldly challenged America to commit to the goal of landing a man on the moon before the end of the decade. We'd not even put a man in orbit. The rockets and spacecraft needed to go beyond Earth orbit didn't exist. Many thought the challenge to be impossible. We didn't have the know-how, but we did have a leader with the vision, the determination, the courage, and the confidence that we could get there. By publicly stating our goal, and by putting a specific time period on a very specific accomplishment, President Kennedy gave us no back door. I believe that a future leader could have the vision, the determination, and the courage to make this kind of a commitment again. Only this time to go beyond the moon. If space was going to be our next frontier, then I wanted to be a part of getting there. After I completed my tour of duty in Germany, I decided to continue my education and received a doctorate in astronautics from MIT. For my thesis, I adapted my experience as a fighter pilot intercepting enemy aircraft to devise a technique for two spacecraft to meet in space called manned orbital rendezvous. Little did anyone know, including me, how critical this work would later be to our successfully landing on the moon. The first time I applied to be a NASA astronaut in 1962, I was turned down because I had not been through the test pilot training school. But I was determined and applied again. This time, my fighter jet experience and NASA's interest in my concept for space rendezvous, I guess, influenced them to accept me in the third group of astronauts, where I became known to my astronaut peers as Dr. Rendezvous. John Hubble, a clever NASA engineer, just died this last week. Figured out that if we used two specialized spacecraft in the mission, a command and service module that would be launched with a crew and remain in orbit around the moon, and then an ascent and descent stage lunar module to land and later rendezvous in orbit with the command and service module. And this is where my MIT studies really paid off. The critical key to this approach would be our ability to reliably rendezvous two spacecraft in orbit around the moon. A very dangerous, potentially dangerous maneuver, for if it failed, there'd be no way to get the crew, rescue them. Luckily, my MIT work was what was needed to be developed for the Gemini program. Between Mercury and Apollo, the Gemini program trained many things that were going to be needed if we're going to go to the moon. The timing of the crew rotation was just right for Neil Armstrong, Mike Collins, and me to be chosen as the crew for this historic mission to maybe be the first. Three of us lived in a space capsule, one with the other, about the size of an automobile. Shortly after launch, we fired the Saturn V's upper stage engines that accelerated us to 25,000 miles an hour on a trajectory bound for the moon. On day 3, we fired our engine again to slow down for the moon's gravity to capture us and put us into lunar orbit. Another engine burn put us in the right orbit to start the landing maneuver. And I think we really believed that we had a 95% chance of returning home safely. I liked that part of it. That was good. That wasn't combat in Korea. That was doing something, and the odds are pretty good that you'll be back. As all of you know, the odds were with us on that day, and we safely landed on the surface of the moon. As I stepped onto the talcum-like lunar dust, regolith, Jack, regolith, regolith. The first words that came to my mind were not beautiful, but magnificent desolation. It was a magnificent achievement for man to set foot on another world for the first time. And yet there was the desolation of the million-year-old lunar landscape with no signs of life, no atmosphere, total blackness beyond the sunlit terrain. Now this is the photograph that Neil took of me. It's known as the visor. Now people have asked me why this iconic photo is so great. I have 3 words. Location, location. Puts the American flag on the moon, and my salute was my proudest moment. I always thought that our flag looked the best of the 6 flags that had been planted there by December 1972. Can't prove it because ours blew over as we lifted up. Nearly 1 billion people all over the world watched and listened as we ventured on the lunar surface. Even though we were further away than 2 humans had ever been, in terms of what we had to do to get back home, we really felt connected to Houston Mission Control and to home. The commemorative plaque we left on the lunar surface reads, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. July 1969, we came in peace for all mankind." Thus has been the spirit of our Apollo space program. I truly believe that mankind's next accomplishment in space will truly involve global participation. No single nation can accomplish this alone. To be successful, it will take cooperation across more than national boundaries. It'll take cooperation across industrial sectors, scientific disciplines, and even public policy stovepipes. In short, it will take what I call a unified space vision, a vision which combines exploration, science, development, commerce, and security. Education is all a part of all of those 5. Since our splashdown in the Pacific, I've come to realize that more than the rocks we brought back or the experiments we left, the true value of Apollo is the amazing story of innovation and teamwork that went into overcoming the obstacles to reach the moon. That effort was driven in part by competition and part by scientific discovery. Everyone on Earth that we sensed in our trip around the world felt they had participated in this incredible journey as we landed and walked on another celestial body for the first time in the history of mankind. The world welcomed us back from the moon as heroes. However, I understand that the people were not cheering for 3 guys, but for what we represented, that by a nation and the world coming together, we had accomplished the impossible. So what's next? My main focus is Mars, but more importantly, getting beyond Earth orbit. I've always felt that Mars should be the next destination following our landings on the moon. And I've been very vocal about this since the early 80s. But the dream of reaching Mars looks like it's finally getting closer to becoming a reality with the Curiosity rover now on the surface of Mars and showing us more than ever before. People ask me all the time, why do we need to go to Mars? Why do we even need a space program? By venturing into space, we improve the life for everyone here on Earth. The scientific advancements and innovations that come from this type of research create products and technology that we use in our daily lives and provide even more convenience to people all over the world. For example, cell phones. I got two of them. Redundancy. TV. I got more than two of those. GPS. I don't like to get lost. All of these wouldn't have been possible without investments in our space program, whether it's for security, military, or the civil space program, or the commercial. So how do we get people excited? And the big question is, how do we plan to get there? We need a plan. We also need a leader in the world to state a public goal with a specific timeline. And I've got ideas about the commitment that should be declared around the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing in 2019. But I've also laid out a plan in my book entitled Mission to Mars, My Vision for Space Exploration, which was published in May of last year by the National Geographic Society. Now, I wanted it to be called Missions with an S on it to Mars, because we're not talking about just one trip there. We're talking about a sequence of building up multiple missions to eventually settle and colonize Mars. To some it may sound like science fiction, but that's what people thought when Kennedy made the commitment to land a man on the moon and bring him back safely. So this is my unified space vision charts. You can't read that, and this isn't my favorite, but it has a suite of missions starting from around now. An international lunar development will be enhanced by their participation in the International Space Station and other international activities. At the Chinese, spacefighting China's participation in the International Space Station on Apollo-Soyuz 40th anniversary to be celebrated a year from this July 2015. Bring the nations together in an international lunar base authority or lunar development authority, patterned after Intelsat or other organizations. Inflatable and rigid exploration modules evaluated at 42 degrees grows to support a low Earth orbit fuel depot, a U.S. position on the moon to lead international lunar activities with 2 Mars spacecraft consisting of high and low propulsion, a node, and an exploration module above the moon's surface at L1 on the Earth side and L2 on the far side, 40,000 miles away. On the near side, 50,000. For science and to develop commercial space, fuel depots, resources, especially water, and to assemble the U.S.-designed evolutionary lunar operational complex, LOC. The Humans to Mars transportation system by 2030 to replace human asteroid retrieval mission in 2021 with a dual robotic and human mission to an asteroid by 2025. Planetary defense from space impacts to be the U.S. leadership at the highest level of national security and combined with the national and international capabilities. Not really a NASA mission. Commercial resources should be investigated and developed first on the moon before proceeding to asteroid resources. Humans to Mars plan permanence from the first sortie to the surface. A rather complete Mars Operation Complex, MOC, assembled from Phobos, the inner moon of Mars, by international crews. I consider myself a global statesman for space, and I've been doing my part to try and move America's space program forward. In 1985, I started my Share Space Foundation to lobby for a lottery to give regular people a chance to go up into space. That it wouldn't be something only governments and the rich could do. People thought it was science fiction, but now with companies like Virgin Galactic, X-Corp, and Blue Origin is starting to become a reality. People will start taking suborbital flights in 2015. I'm the AX Apollo Space Ambassador, and last December they gave away 22 suborbital flights to winners from all over the world. So I don't have to develop my lottery idea. They're doing it so much better than I could. So I'm excited to see my dream for space tourism coming to fruition. Finally, I want to leave you one last thing. A hope to inspire young people, especially the generation that's into gaming, with my new strategy video game called Buzz Aldrin Space Program Manager. It gives you a chance to manage our space program from the beginning. You can manage budgets, pick the rockets, take the risks, see if you have a better idea of how we can do things in the past. I know, because I'm living proof, on with Jack and the 24 total Americans that reached the moon, that it can be done. Thank you very much.